Hi there, my name's Eric Francis Compolino, host of Planet Waves TV, here with a special edition of Planet Waves TV about the Gemini solar chart, as promised in the currently current edition of Planet Waves. Today's May 23rd, 2016. The sun is newly in Gemini. And I'm here to tell you a little bit about one of the main secrets of the what I'll call the public astrology profession. And that is, how do horoscope writers and people who work with what is called sun sign astrology, how do they actually know what they know about your sign and the things that are influencing you in order to be able to make the statements, the predictions, the assertions that they make? What is the basis of that? What is this chart that is used, which is called the solar chart? The solar chart is a chart that is based on the sun sign only. It's for the public because most people don't know their rising sign. They have no idea what their rising sign is, and so there needs to be a tool that astrologers use, and this is a very common tool. And the thing is that, like any tool, it can be used better or worse. It can be understood with more or less competence. It can be used with more or less experience, more or less elegantly. This is what it looks like. Most astrologers don't use a device like this, and in other words, all colored in like this. I have made this one for illustration purposes only, and the idea here is that this tool tells us everything we need to know about the sun sign Gemini and also the rising sign Gemini. I'll get to why that is in a second, but it's based on the idea that in astrology there are really two wheels that are working. The first wheel is the wheel of the signs, and which is the backdrop of everything, basically. And the second wheel is the wheel of the houses. Now, without getting into too many technical details, let's just say that the houses and the signs have different delineations. Though in some ways they overlap, but they're really different delineations. But the most important thing is that the wheels are spinning and can land in any configuration. So here's another way to say that. This is not that easy to explain, and it's why it's often not explained, and then it ends up being this big mystery that people pretend that they don't understand. You can see here on the very inner wheel, there are numbers, and those are the numbers of the houses, right? Now, if you can imagine that any sign can land on the first house, that's the basis of this conversation. For example, consider and the first house is right here. The first house is the house that is right below the line on the left. So any astrology chart pretty much begins with this line, and this line is usually called the ascendant or rising sign. But because we're working in sun sign astrology, we don't know your ascendant. We could find it out if you knew your birth time, but I don't know your ascendant. Probably not. Maybe I know you. Okay. So the first house can, for example, have on it Cancer, or it can have on it Gemini. It can have on it anything. You can turn the wheel this way and have the first house be Taurus. Just change the number in there. Have it be Aries. Have it be Pisces. And I'll be going through all 12 signs. This is the first video in this series that I'm making to explain what a solar chart is, how I do my readings for your sun sign, which are also applicable to your rising sign, and how much we can find out from a solar chart. It's amazing. Now, the main concept operating here is that when an astrologer writing what I would call public astrology, a horoscope column, or doing a reading, kind of like my birthday readings or annual readings, that is intended to be accessed by someone only knowing their day of birth, only knowing their sun sign, how much information we can actually get. It's not merely a sign description, and it's not merely speculation when it comes to interpreting the movements of other planets. There is an entire chart to work with, and the thing that makes it the Gemini solar chart is that the first house has Gemini on it. House 1, right there, below the left side, that's the eastern horizon, has Gemini. And because the first house has Gemini, that means that the second house has Cancer, and the third house has Leo, and so forth. Just for the sake of comparison, were we to go to the Cancer solar chart, the first house has Cancer, the second house has Leo, the third house has Virgo, the fourth house has Libra, and so on. This completely rearranges the chart, the rulers, the interpretations, and the descriptions, because the houses keep their meaning while the signs change behind the houses. So, not sure if I explained that well enough, but let's just stay in the context of the Gemini solar chart and get this image in our minds. Let's get this microphone positioned properly. Okay, so when we have Gemini on the first house, the four houses that I've illustrated in blue are the main action. That's mostly where we get the idea of what is going on in any chart, really, and it works well for a solar chart. And the four houses I've highlighted are House 1, that's Gemini, House 4, that's Virgo, House 7, that's Sagittarius, or the opposite sign, and then House 10, Pisces. House 1 is one's sense of self. It's one's sense of being. It's how you describe yourself, how you look, how you feel. If you're born with the sun in Gemini, that's your Gemini sun sign. And there's a series of descriptions that we can give. But the question is, where are those descriptions coming from? And one place the descriptions are coming from is how all the other signs around the wheel relate to your sign. So let's start with the most obvious one, which is Sagittarius, your relationship house. When we describe, we astrologers who write sun sign columns and do readings that are based on the sun sign, describe relationships for the sign Gemini, most of what we're talking about is what is going on either in Sagittarius or involving the ruling planet of Sagittarius, which is Jupiter. When we talk about what's going on in your sign or with you, most of what we're talking about is what's happening actually in Gemini or involving the ruling planet of Gemini, which is Mercury. So, the signs exist, and the signs have these representatives that can be pretty much anywhere. They're called planets. And we know from ancient astrology the associations between planets and signs. So, to sum that back up again, the Gemini solar chart starts with Gemini in the first house, and then we have a planet we can look for. There might be something going on in Gemini, or the ruling planet of Gemini, in this case Mercury, could be doing anything. It happens to be that the day that I'm doing this is the day after Mercury stationed direct in Taurus, and so there was some important action involving the planet that rules Gemini. It happened in another sign. It happened up here in Taurus, but it's easy to make up a story about that. It's easy to describe that and how it might feel. And we also know that planet is heading toward Gemini at this point, so it's going to make a breakthrough. It's going to show up in your sign at some point. That's also news. When we're talking about relationships, then the story is based out of the seventh house, which is Sagittarius, and straight away we see something very interesting, which is the kind of kindred relationship of Gemini and Sagittarius, and the way that these two signs work as one system of self and other. And they're actually integrated, they're quite harmonized, and you might say that it's almost as if Gemini is always looking in the mirror of Sagittarius. Now, this doesn't mean that you're only going to have relationships with Sagittarius people, but it does mean that the outlook you take on relationships, the approach you take to relationships is optimistic, that it is in the big world you have high ideals, you have real philosophical ideas about relationships, and you're looking for someone who is smart, for someone who is philosophical, for someone who is benevolent, someone who is generous with you, all attributes of the sign Sagittarius. Now, the problem with having Sagittarius on the seventh house cusp is in your relationship location, is that Sagittarian qualities also include not liking to be crowded, insisting on a real measure of independence, There can be a slight arrogance to Sagittarius people, verging on a kind of antisocial quality. And that is a property that you can attract in your relationships. And again, it does not have to come from people born under the sign Sagittarius. This device, this solar chart, is describing you and your tendencies. And pretty much anyone can fulfill any role. So, self versus other. And this tells us, for example, you want to make sure you look for people, if you're a Gemini, who come toward you, who don't go away from you, if you want that. You too might appreciate the fact that you attract partners who have a need for greater independence, right? But you have to work with that. You have to find some balance between independence and interrelationship with you. Okay, now, I mentioned that the signs in blue, which are called the mutable signs, are the most relevant to your sign. There is a cross of the heavens called the mutable cross, and yours is the first of the mutable signs. The second of the mutable signs is Virgo, the third of the mutable signs is Sag, and the last is Pisces. So these all act like extensions of your sign. This works for all the signs. For example, with the sign Cancer, Capricorn is an extension, Libra is an extension, Aries is an extension. The most direct relevant extensions are the other signs in your color. So I've described something about what this means if you have Sagittarius on the 7th. This thing about do people really want to be close to you? Are they striving for independence more? Or are they striving for closeness more? You want to watch that. Do people seem to go away from you or go toward you? What are you dealing with? Now, the idea of having Virgo in the 4th house, see that? And only Gemini has Virgo in the 4th house. There's your 4th house, and there's Gemini. For example, if you go right to the very next sign, the 4th house is covered by Libra. That's completely different than having the 4th house covered by Virgo, right? And that describes you, and it describes something about the way that you like to, for example, keep your home. That's the 4th house. Something about your family background. That's the 4th house. Something about your emotional state and your concept of safety. That's the 4th house also. And so when we're describing the sign Gemini, and we are describing what it is about Gemini that makes Gemini what it is, and we are looking for information from the 4th house, home, security base, and family, the first place we look is to Virgo for that information. And this is partly implying that you have more in common with your family than most people that you know, but at the same time, you are more different than your family than most people know. Now, why do I say that? The similarity comes from the fact that both Gemini and Virgo are ruled by Mercury, the same planet. That's a similarity. However, there is tension in that these are oriented in a 90-degree aspect, a square. So it's like same planet, same idea in some ways, but a completely different orientation. You want to keep your home your way. That's a Virgo thing. You want your environment to be very specifically yours. One implication is that you like it to be neat and tidy and hygienic. That does not always work. It can partly be modified by planets that fall wherever these are. However, there is a control that you want over your home. Virgo has, as one of its deepest themes, a controlling quality, and that's one of its assets and one of its kind of pitfalls as well. So remember that about yourself. Now, if we want to look for information about your career, we come up to Pisces here, because the 10th house, house number 10, right on top of the chart, is the one that describes your career. And this is something saying that, first of all, it's not easy for you to figure out what you want to do, because Pisces is only clear under certain circumstances. It can be very driven to set goals, but again, only under certain circumstances. And so one of the most important messages from your solar chart with Pisces up on the 10th house is to pay attention to what it is that you feel called to do, what you want to do, and to not fall for the whole fog thing, the whole mist fog thing, where you're just uncertain all the time of what you want to do. And it's very important that you follow callings and that you conduct experiments, and that you also learn techniques for keeping your focus, because one of the things that Pisces can have some difficulty with is keeping focus. Of course, now we live in the age of ADD. Everyone seems to have an issue keeping focus. But for you especially, you want to be able to set clear goals and make sure that you feed yourself with a sense of accomplishment. Now, we've been talking 15 minutes. I've only covered the signs on your cross. All the other signs land somewhere else in your chart. So, for example, I'll give you an easy example here. As a Gemini, you have Libra on the fifth house. The fifth house is the house of art. This is suggesting that you have a more refined aesthetic sense than is typically given credit for Geminis, because we know this because the fifth house is about art. House 5 is about art. When we put Libra there, Libra is about beauty. That's about the best combination that you could want. It also describes you as having the potential to actually have some discipline around the work that you do, but also to have you have your own aesthetic. It's very important for you to remember that you are in possession of what you believe is beautiful to you, and it's essential to feed that. Now, here's an interesting move that you can make. Libra is connected with Pisces through the planet Venus. Libra is ruled by the planet Venus, and Pisces, it has Venus exalted in its sign. This is advanced use of the solar chart. There's a relationship between the 10th house and the 6th house through the planet Venus that links together Libra and Pisces. If you were ever wondering what the Libra-Pisces connection is, that connection is Venus. And when you have that link, one of the things you can do is you have the ability to bring this beauty function, this aesthetic function from the fifth house, your house of art and fun, into your career. So I think that one of the things that you can say confidently to Geminis is do something in your professional life where you are expressing beauty, where it is part of your daily routine to express beauty because you know it is beautiful to you, you love beauty, and you are called because you have Pisces on the 10th house to do something beautiful and meaningful and relevant and spiritually oriented. Just for example here, let's give another example. As a Gemini, you have the sign Cancer on the second house. Now, this is a description. Second house describes monetary issues. It describes resources. It describes money. So you can see the little 2 here. Let's get that as close as we possibly can using my highly advanced method of graphics. And then the sign Cancer falls on the second house because Gemini is on the first. That means going in order, you're going to have Cancer on the second house. Well, where you see something with the sign Cancer, you see fluctuation. So we bring the idea of fluctuation, cycling like the moon, because the moon rules Cancer. So we know that the moon and Cancer share certain properties. And one of the properties they share is fluctuation. The second house is resources and money. And this describes the fluctuations, the cyclical nature that you live with your resources. Now, what do you do about this? Well, this is suggesting that you must always have a rainy day fund. If you know, for example, that you're going to live live a life of fluctuating resources where you might have income one month and then not another month, or you may be changing modes of employment, or you may switch to another job that's not as lucrative because you want to do it because of this beauty career thing. You want to do something more interesting and aesthetically pleasing. You have to have money saved up. And so one of the things you can say to Geminis is, because your finances fluctuate, make sure that you save money, right? And have a rainy day fund for when the moon is waning, metaphorically speaking, and there's less, and when the moon is full, and when there is more. This is also very important for Gemini because you are ruled by the planet Mercury, and Mercury is always going retrograde. And so you have 2 important chart elements that speak to change and fluctuation, very appropriate for a mutable sign, but the advanced use, the spiritual use, the growth-oriented use of astrology is suggesting strongly that you compensate for these fluctuations by committing to a kind of steadiness and a kind of stability and giving yourself the opportunity for stability by making sure that you are proactive, thinking in advance, that is to say, and that you are saving for the future, and that you have, whether it be gigs lined up in the future or you have money stashed away for the future. Okay, so we could talk about something out of every one of these houses. I'll give one more example in the time that we have available. You have Aries up here on the 11th house. See, house 11, see that? House 11. And because you have Gemini in the first, 11 signs later takes us back to Aries on the 11th house. The 11th house is the house of the public. It's your circle of friends. It's where you reach out into the community. And the implication of having Aries on the 11th is that you are not bashful. So we often think of Geminis as being direct communicators and liking to be conversant, but that's not merely a quality of Gemini. The ability to go to a party and to just show up and be exactly who you are is a property of Aries on the 11th house of Gemini. And we're getting at here that the signs all modify each other. The signs and houses modify each other and allow us to tell a more complex story about what is up with your sign. Now, we know all of this. This is all operating in the background. Now we can add all the planets. We haven't even talked about where the planets are. But once we put the planets into this configuration, suddenly it is possible to get a startlingly detailed illustration of your life and of what's going on now. And this is exactly what I do in the, for example, Gemini annual reading, the Gemini birthday readings, and the Gemini mid-year and spring readings, is I look at where the planets fall in relation to the sign Gemini, right? And then tell a more detailed story based on having this as your background, as the base level of the chart. It's a very cool invention. It was my first discovery as an astrologer when I was reading the Patric Walker horoscope in the New York Post. This is from TV Guide. Patrick died 21 years ago, but this is a cool visual on video. When an astrologer writes a sun sign column, and they do it well, you ask yourself, how the heck do they know this? And the way that they know it is that good sun sign horoscope writers have the solar chart for Gemini in all the signs in their mind. And then we know when something important is happening, for example, in the sign Taurus, that tells us something. When something important is happening in Aries, that's telling us something, and we know the context because we know what house it is in. The houses are very important. As Patric Walker said, it's all in the houses. In my article is called It's All About the Houses. Patrick said, Jonathan Cainer quoted me directly. Patrick said directly to Jonathan, and I got it firsthand from somebody I love and trust. Patrick said it's all in the houses, and the houses are the environments where things happen. They're the physical environments and the emotional and psychic environments, and we get this description of the houses, the quality of the houses, because for each one of the sun signs, a different set of signs, completely different set of signs falls on all 12 houses. It works beautifully. It works brilliantly. It's tapping into a very old technique called whole sign houses, where we just associate one sign with one house. It works quite well, especially in the absence of other information. So it is actually possible to work without a natal chart. You have to be good at it. You have to be practiced at it. You have to believe in your chart. You have to trust your chart, as Martha Lang Westcott says. I trust my chart. I love this device. I think that the very best of the sun sign astrologers, including Patric Walker, Jonathan Cainer, Linda Goodman, all understood the nature of the solar chart and how it works. I'm here revealing some of those astrology secrets to you. Thank you for tuning in. Check out your Gemini reading. That's coming soon. The Gemini readings are good all year, and I suggest you go back and listen to some of the old ones. Sometimes they're free. Write to us if you'd like to get an older reading for your sign. For example, last year's birthday reading, write to us at office@planetwaves.net. We'll send it to you. There are links easily found for getting current readings, or just go to the Planet Waves Astrology Boutique. It's astrology for the people. It's like $20 or $30, and you get much more than you pay for. All right. For astrology, for Planet Waves, my name is Eric Francis Coppolino, professor of ephemeris, and your friendly neighborhood astrologer. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.